All right, so yeah, you remember yesterday, the APIs we created, they look something like that. So if I go to localhost 3001, I believe that was the backend port, /res/fruits, then you got the list of fruits, right? And then, however, if I want to get a particular fruit like the apple, then it fetches only the apple details. Does anyone remember the advantage of having an API, having an endpoint just for a particular fruit? Technically speaking, on the front end, if I want to get the details of the apple, I can get all the fruits, and then on the front end I can do find, filter, or whatever. So what's the advantage of having a specific endpoint for each fruit?
Directly connected from the backend using rest.get. Using get.
Using get what?
Using the .get function.
.get function, I don't know what that means. Let me give you a hint. So what happens if we got 3,000 fruits?
Yeah, it's easier for me to so no, if we have APIs, it's easier to retract the data that we want from this.
But that's arguably, because at the end of the day, it's easier for the front end, I agree, but for the back end, it's on the other way around. I mean, at some point you need to do the find, the filter, you need to do that. The question is, do we do it on the front end or on the back end? Where do we filter the data? That's the question. So if we got 3,000 fruits and you are using your smartphone, what's the difference? And you get a limited data plan of 1 gig of data a month.
So yeah, when we wanted to say, yeah, we can use the data from the backend to for multiple front-end applications. So we can reuse the same data if we change it from the front end. If we have the same in the backend.
Okay, so that's a decent answer, Octavian. So if you got multiple front ends, you don't have to do the find and filter every time on each front end. So if you do it on the back end, then all your clients or your front ends, Android, iOS, can take advantage of that flexibility. But once again, okay, I respect that. But the main reason, once again, so if you got 3,000 fruits and you request them all, you may be downloading 100 kilobytes of data. So what's the point of downloading 100 kilobytes of data into your smartphone if in reality you just care about one particular fruit? Yeah? It's about efficiency. That request may wait 1 kilobyte. It's just one fruit. But if I want to get all the fruits, here I got only 3, but imagine we got lots of fruits. Yeah? It will be way more expensive. In terms of what? In terms of data consuming. Yeah, if you got 1 gig of data all once a month, yeah, you really want to make sure you download just what you need, right? But also in terms of performance, that request may take few seconds to complete because I have to download a lot of data. However, if I just want to fetch one fruit, it will be much faster. Yeah? So that's a classic job interview question. Why we want to retrieve only the data we want? Because there is no point of bringing to the front end a lot of data that you don't need. Yeah? All right, so once we agree on that, hopefully we agree on that, let's try to build a component. So let's talk about React state. Look at what I'm doing, guys. I'm creating a new component called fruit. Yeah, that makes sense. So now I would like to create a stateful component. So can anybody tell me, please, how do I create a stateful component? Class, what else? Fruit, correct. Jiyun, what else? Extends, right, Camila? What else? Extends what? Correct. Correct, that's right. So then, what else? How do we initialize the state? Constructor, that's correct, Chuck. Constructor, what else? Super, yep. Let's hard code fruit for now, yeah? Only front end, like Coldflix. For now, Coldflix is hard-coded in the front end. So can I do fruit, name, apple, price, 1.2, for instance, yeah? That's a fruit, right? Something hard-coded. So now, how do I render, how do I display the fruit name is apple, the price is 1.2? How do we do that?
Using render.
Rendered, okay. And then what? Return, and then some HTML in here, right? So, for instance, let's add a couple of p tags. You remember a p tag, a paragraph? So, fruit name, now we're creating a catalog. And how do we display the fruit name?
Open curly braces. This dot state.
This is the state, anyone apart from Anita. This state, what else?
What do you want to display?
Fruits,
Fruit dot name.
like that?
No, it's fruit.
In singular, right? Correct. And likewise, to display the price, fruit.price. From an indentation point of view, is that called right? That looks a bit weird, right? Because the p tags belong to the parent div that should be a bit on the right. So you can always do right click, format document, and then pop. Now it looks perfect. Let's see if it works. Let's see if it works. So back to our app. There you go. It works, right? So that's cool. That's fantastic. However, you know, I don't want to hard code my fruit on the front end. I want to ask the backend, hey, backend, give me the name of the fruit and give me the price. So this is important, guys, and this is the tricky part of the workshop. First of all, how do we call the backend? With a method built in JavaScript called fetch. So fetch is a method in JavaScript to call the backend and get data back. But the next question is, where? Do we call the backend as part of the constructor? Do we call the backend as part of the render function? No, none of that, none of that. So there is a convention in React, whatever you want to call the backend, and you will call the backend a lot on your daily basis, trust me. So you need to add a new method. Does anybody remember which method runs after the component has been rendered once?
Component mount.
Correct, guys, component did mount, yeah? So we got component did mount, and then here we call the backend. Yeah? Why component, why not render? Can anybody give me a reason why we should never, ever call the backend here? So the syntax will be something like that. Fetch, rest, fruits, apple. Yeah, and then few more things. Eh? That's not complete yet, but that will call the backend. So why we should never ever do that?
In case the API fails, then the entire, the page would be broken or something.
No, that's not the reason.
We go in an infinite loop.
For the infinite loop. I like that. Eventually, yes, you may go into an infinite loop. Yeah? You may go to an infinite loop. But even if you control the infinite loop, don't forget something, guys. You cannot control how many times the render function is executed. React may be calling, that's not magic. There are some algorithms, so you can predict that. But the thing is, the render function will run multiple times. Could be 1, but could be 20. So you don't want to get the apple details 20 times. That's completely pointless. That goes against the basic principles of efficiency, performance, all these sort of things. Eh? How many times do we want to get the details of an apple? Only once, that's right. Eh? Once I get the details, that's it. If something changes, I will refresh the page and that's it. But I don't want to call the backend multiple times. Eh? So that's, if I'm reviewing an unattended test from a Unity developer and I see that, if I see that, literally that person is out. I don't care anything else. Yeah, I don't care anything else. That person will never get a job. Cool. So component inbound. Yeah. Some of you may be thinking, all right, but can we do it on the constructor? I'll tell you something. Technically speaking, it may work. However, this is considered an anti-pattern, and it goes beyond the scope of the session to explain why. Yeah? So the constructor is just to initialize your component. If you want to call the backend, always do it on the component div map. All right, so what's the specific syntax about fetch? That's a bit weird. So first of all, we call the backend. And now look at the syntax. We need to have to type .then. Do you know what .then means? That's right, Yiyun. That's right. So from a readability point of view, then means, hey, call the backend, and then once the backend gave you an answer, do something else. So technically speaking, this is called promises. We'll talk, you may have heard about that word before, promises. We'll talk about promises probably next week, yeah, in detail. So promises is essentially a way to handle asynchronous code. Yeah, whenever you call the backend, that's an asynchronous task. In other words, you call the backend, but the backend may take 10 seconds to give you an answer. And you know when you get a loading message on a web app? Yeah, this is because the backend is running some operations. We don't block your browser. You can continue sometimes clicking around. Yeah? But in parallel, in the background, we are trying to sort out an operation. So this is what we call asynchronous JavaScript. By the way, promises, as we will explain next week, they were not part of JavaScript originally. So there was just a GitHub project created by someone, a random person. Okay? But the community really loved using promises to the point that starting from 2015, these are part of the standard of JavaScript, which is fantastic. Yeah? That's absolutely amazing. All right, so look at the syntax because that's weird. So the backend will send the data to the front end. Hey, here's the details of the apple, hopefully. However, the format the data is received is not readable by JavaScript. It will receive like a blob, like a weird chunk of the data, encoded, whatever. So we need to transform it into something readable. How do we do that? Look at the syntax. So you just need to learn or get used to that syntax. So whenever the backend sends data to the front end, please transform it to a JSON. Does anyone know what JSON means? That's right. So JSON is a data format that is considered today the standard way of sending data front end and back end. Yeah? To simplify things, even though that's not strictly correct, JSON is just JavaScript data. Could be an object, could be an array. Yeah? Historically speaking, XML, because of all the influence of Java, blah, 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 that was the standard. But today, no one really uses XML to send data front end and back end. Yeah? Everyone uses JSON. So once again, JSON, to simplify things, think that JSON is either a JavaScript object or a JavaScript array. Yeah? Once again, be careful with that because that's not strictly correct. There are some differences. But to simplify things, that's the way it works more or less. All right, so once we got the JSON, because JSON is either a JavaScript object or a JavaScript array, then we can easily manipulate it. So look, then, again, you see, so look at the way we chain instructions. Call the backend, then, once the backend gives you an answer, transform the data into either an object or an array, and then, once the transformation is done, then you got your data. Yeah, so here, data, that's exactly what the backend returns. Could be an array of fruits, could be a single fruit, we'll see. So can we do, for instance, console.log? Let's see if it works. Before talking about the state, before trying to render, let's add just a console log to see if that works. The backend return, yeah, return it, and then data. I want to see if I can actually bind front and back, yeah? If it works, then it will be a piece of cake to display that data here, if it works. But let's see if it works or not. Actually, to see if it works, I need to enable DevTools, right? Because it's just a console log for now. All right, so let's open DevTools. And, we got, first of all, failed to load resource. The server responds with the status of 500 internal server error. That's a bit weird. Sorry, Camila, can you say it again? That's interesting, Camila. Look, let's have a look to the network panel. So if I refresh again, and I show you, let me see if I can get the network. Oh, sorry, that's a bit hard to deal with. What are my requests? They should be there, right? All right, I'll tell you something. I need to restart the server because I've done something before. That problem will not happen to you. So I fix the problem first, but until I restart the server, I won't be on the situation that I want. So let me just place restart the server, and that will hopefully show me the information I'm looking for. Because you see, it looks that work, but that shouldn't work. That just worked because something. So just ignore that message for now. Now, that's perfect. That's literally what I wanted. Look, we got an error. Unexpected token, blah, blah, blah. So my console log is not displayed. And if I refresh, that's pretty much the same thing, right? My console log is not there. I'm wondering, here we go. Here is my network. So whenever, that will happen many times to you. If you are trying to connect front-end and back-end and it doesn't work, the first thing you have to do is to check the network tab in order to analyze what's going on. So let me try to find the best way of showing that information. Yeah. So you got many stuff going on here. Thankfully, you can filter out. So if you search, for instance, Apple, because that's the name of our endpoint, just click on it. You need to enable JavaScript to run this out. That's a very weird message, right? What the hell that means? If you don't know what that means, the first thing I will try to do is copy that request that the front end is doing and paste it on the URL. Just see if that returns me the Apple details. Oh, what the hell? That's not the Apple details. That's the React app again. So why is that? Correct. What is the front end running? 3000. What is the back end running?
3001.
Correct. So should we point to 3001? So if I point to the right server, it works. So does that mean here, can it do that? Does it make sense? All right, so once again, regardless of whether that works or not, if I see that code on a candidate, that person is out immediately. If I start reading the component, I read that, out. Sorry, we are looking for a different profile, even if it's for a graduate not getting paid at all, yeah? Because that person is missing the most basic principles of integration front-end and back-end. Why this is the worst code you can ever write? Very simple. That may work. I mean, I'm not even going to check if that works or not. That won't work. But even if that works, that's the worst piece of code you can ever write. Because that will only work as far as you work locally in your local host. But as soon as you deploy the app to the cloud, to Heroku, to AWS, anywhere, that won't work anymore. Yeah, because you won't be dealing with local hosts. You will be dealing with HTTP, www.mysexyapp.com. Yeah?
Even it might not work on a local host if the port gets changed or something like
Of course, even once again, locally may work or not. But the thing is, this is horrible. Because, in other words, that will only work in your computer. You see, that doesn't make any sense. Eh? That breaks all the basic principles. I can tell you something, actually. The very, very, very first time in my life, I had to present a web app to a customer that was like many years ago. I did that mistake. I was working locally. We didn't even have a laptop. It was like an old machine. And I had some images. And the images of that very old website, I'm talking like maybe 17 years ago, the images, they look something like that, guys. IMG, SRC, HTTP, local host, images, and then, I don't know, fruit.png, something like that, right? That worked to me locally. As soon as I shared the code with the customer, it didn't work anymore. And I had to present that. All the images were broken. That was a horrible mistake, yeah? The very first time I had to present something publicly. All right, so never ever do that. Never ever do that. But then, if you don't do that, essentially back to what we got before. This is what we got before. So that is way more beautiful, because that means that will essentially keep whichever the current domain is. So if we're in localhost 3000, then the endpoint will be that. However, if we are on mysexysite.com, the endpoint will be that, which is right. Yeah? So that will dynamically inherit the domain. However, you may be thinking, but okay, fine, that's okay. I see the advantages. However, we still have a problem, because my data is not offered by the front-end server. My data is offered by the back-end server. So how do we deal with the problem? So there is a keyword here. Proxy is your friend. So look, back to my DevTools. Where is it? Let me open DevTools. So at the moment, you got front-end 3000 and back-end 3001. Yeah? So the data is here. But in reality, we're asking the data at the front end. So thanks to a proxy, this is a bit hard to explain. Do you remember I told you yesterday that in reality, when we talk about the front end is running a server. I mean, you got the number 3000 because there is a server offering your static files in React. So we got a server here, and then we also got, obviously, a server here. That's the one we have configured yesterday, and this is something running under the hood by Facebook, yeah, locally. So what we have to do is to create a proxy, and the proxy means when we ask something to port 3000, then go to server on 3000 and redirect the request to the server running on port 3001. That's what a proxy means. Whenever we go to localhost 3000, localhost 3000 REST fruits, in reality, redirect the request to localhost 3001 REST fruits under the hood. Why we do that? Because then the communication is not front-end to server. The communication is server. Oops, sorry, I clicked somewhere. Server to server. Yeah? When talking about APIs, we talk server to server in the majority of the time. Yeah? Next month you will find out when you build your team app. If you want to integrate with TFL Transport for London to get the delays on the Jubilee line, you won't check that from the front end. So if there is an API on TFL called, I don't know, tfl.org/rest/delays, I just made that up, right? You won't call that from the front end. You will call your backend, and your backend will check that. Backend to backend. That's for security. Because front end to backend, that's risky. We can sniff the data going up and down, but backend to backend is much safer. Yeah? To simplify things.
Can you repeat the last thing again? Sorry, the proxy thing, the connection. When you explain about the TFL, just
Yes. So when you use fetch, you are not likely to use an absolute URL like www.google.com. I mean, in some specific cases that may work, but generally speaking, you don't want to do that. The way it works is, if you want to check with an external API, first of all, your front end asks your backend. Yeah? So what's the backend of the React app, the port 3000? And that backend will ask the other backend, the external one. Don't forget, guys, we are running 2 servers. One server on port 3000, that's the React server, and one server on port 3001, that's the API server. Yeah? So these servers have to talk to each other. So how do we enable a proxy? There is a lot of literacy about how a proxy works, goes beyond the scope of this session. So for now, in other words, I want to be able to go to localhost 3000/res/fruits. So whenever I go to that endpoint, I want my front-end server, I want that server to redirect the request to the backend server. That's literally what I want. To do that, first of all, stop the server. So at the moment we got 2 servers running, yeah, front and back. Let me kill them all. Control C. Yeah? Let's clear everything. And now, thankfully, even though understanding how a proxy works, I understand it's a bit complicated, I admit that. Setting up a proxy is a piece of cake, thankfully. You have to go to package.json and then simply add a new line anywhere in the root level of your file. By the way, this is a JSON file. You see? Package.json. That's a JSON. And I hope you agree with me, that looks like a JavaScript object, yeah? Curly brace, key values, it's like a JavaScript object. Yeah, it's pretty much the same thing. So how do you set up your proxy? Look, you type proxy, and now you just need to determine the target server. So what's the target server? That's right, Octavian, 3001. That means whenever we receive a request, let me show you back. Whenever we send a request to localhost 3000, then redirect the request to another server called 3001. I mean, technically speaking, here we could type Google or whatever, yeah? So we're just establishing a link between 2 servers, our local one and an external one. Out of coincidence, the external 3001 is also running locally, but it may be running on Jiyun's laptop, yeah? So there is a lot of flexibility when talking about proxying. That's it.
I have one question. For example, if we want to access any page on the front end, and if we give the URL, it might treat it as it wants it from 3001.
No. That's a good question. So what Anita is asking is, but wait a minute. What if I want to get something in the front end? Imagine that you are creating a web app, and I want to go to localhost 3000/ details. Yeah, you are creating the details page for your Conflicts app. So will that redirect the flow to the backend? No, not at all. Not at all. So the way this works is, when you go to localhost 3000, first of all, the front-end server will try to deal with that request. So when you go to localhost 3000 details, because you are using React Router DOM, the front-end routing, it will be able to understand, oh, yes, I know what you mean. I know that you want to serve that web app, that page with the details of the TV show. So if the server on the front end is able to understand what you are trying to do, it won't bypass the request to the backend. Yeah? It will serve the target component, web page, whatever. Only if the front end doesn't really know what to do with that request, then the server running on the front end, port 3000, will say, hey, all right, if you try to go to localhost 3000/details, I know what you want. But if you try to go to localhost 3000/res/fruits, I don't really know. I don't have any routing on React Router DOM. I don't know what you mean. Because I don't know what you mean, I will pass the control to my proxy that is on the right-hand side, 3001 fruits.
Is it based on the URL which is following, for example?
It's based on the URL. Yes, it's based on the URL. Yes.
Okay.
We'll see that in a minute, Anita. We'll see. I mean, guys, proxy is a huge world. Yeah? I'm not trying you to understand all the details about how the proxy works. That takes maybe years. Yeah. So that I'm just sharing with you some keywords. So if you want to research more about proxies, so you know how to search that. So Once you've done that, look, it's just a single line. Make sure you leave that line, you drop the line on the root folder of your JSON. Don't leave it inside of dependencies or inside of scripts. See? It's just a root level property on your package.json. So once you do that, then let's start the servers again. You remember npm run start all. So now you see the backend starting in 3001, the frontend is starting again in port 3000, and now it's, you cannot see that, but it's trying to refresh the page. Let's see what happens when it refreshes the page. Can you see what happened now? Look, hey, the backend return, so it works. Yes, by adding the proxy, now the frontend can forward the request to the backend. In other words, look, if I refresh the page, I'm now trying to go to localhost 3000. So localhost 3000, it will essentially, actually, let me check with sources. Can I copy? All right, let me write it again here. So we got, once again, the server or front-end server running on port 3000, and we got the backend server running on port 3001. So if the URL is localhost 3000, does the front-end know how to solve that request? Yes, it knows, because that's the home page of your React application. So when you go to localhost 3000, the front-end server will say, yes, I know how to, or what to do, right? When we go to localhost 3000, not here, but in your conflicts, once you go to /details, will the front-end server know how to deal with that request? Yes, because you'll have set up in your app.js a route to display a particular component in React. That's fine. But now the request is different. Now the request is localhost 3000 /rest/fruits, Apple, whatever. Yeah? So the front end doesn't know what to do with that route. So if I go to rest fruits, then Apple, rest fruits Apple, give me a second. That's interesting. Look, to me, that doesn't work as expected. You see, if I go to localhost 3001 rest fruits Apple, that's okay. I hope you agree with me. So if I ask the backend directly, of course, the backend knows what to do with it, right? So it will return the list of fruits with name, apple, price, or whatever. Yep, that's okay. But if I ask the front end, it should work as well, because the front end, because it's not able to understand the request, it should simply pass the control to the backend. That's the theory. I'll tell you something. It didn't work. You see? It didn't work. If I go to localhost 3000 /rest fruits Apple, to me, that's wrong. That's wrong. So now let's see how to debug the issue, because to me that's unexpected. I have a few theories. The first theory is Google Chrome is doing bullshit again. Yeah? Because to me, that shouldn't return the front-end web page. That should return the data on the backend. I think the browser is catching, is doing some weird operations under the hood. So if you think your browser should return something else, always go incognito first. Yeah? Because with incognito, in theory, there should be no caching, no, no persistent data. So now look, localhost 3000 fruits Apple. So if Google Chrome is right, it should return that. That means I'm wrong. If I'm right, it should return the details of the Apple. Right. That's not right, guys. There is something going on here. Yeah, I'm honestly confused now. I'm genuinely confused. And I will tell you why I'm genuinely confused. I'm still thinking there is an issue with Google Chrome. So let me double my bet. Let me go to Safari. I never use Safari, so there is no caching about Safari here, right? Oh, all right, so I may be wrong, definitely. That's interesting. Let's try to debug the issue, guys. I'm honestly lost at the moment. I don't know why this doesn't work. And the thing is, look, if I go to localhost 3000, that's the front-end server, yep, and I refresh, do you see that message? The backend return. Let me check on the network. Look, do you agree with me? That's the endpoint I was trying to hit on the URL. But here it returns something different. That's very confusing. That's inconsistent. Look, if I go to that endpoint on the URL, it returns the React application. But if I go to that endpoint using fetch, it returns something else. That breaks the most fundamental principles of how the web works, yeah? So there is something clearly wrong here, but I'm struggling to tell you what is that. Is there any caching? No, there is nothing here. Oh, that's very weird. Let me restart the server again, but that shouldn't matter, I believe. Yeah, that's a bit unfortunate, because if that's complicated enough, having this type of issues don't help, I believe. The proxy clearly works because of that message. You see that message? That means that the front end can bypass the request to the backend. So the proxy is clearly working. However, because of a reason I cannot tell you at the moment, Google Chrome is unable to show me that information when I go to the URL directly. Yeah. I mean, once again, I don't know. I'm going to be super honest. I don't know why Google Chrome is doing that, but I'm 90% convinced that Google Chrome is not working fine. And once again, my reasoning behind is, you see that URL, right? Does it say 3000 or 3001? It's 3000, right? So am I accessing the front-end server or the back-end server? The front-end. And is it working? Yes. It's giving me the data. So who has the data? The front-end server or the back-end server? The back-end. So in other words, the front-end is really bypassing the request to the back-end because it's right. I mean, I can see it's right.
But it is not hard-coded in the React app, so should we not, in the curly brackets, now pass the dynamically the data?
Which curly brackets?
No, sorry, if you go back to the app, to the React app.
Yes.
To React.js, yeah, are we not displaying, if you go down?
Yeah, but hey, listen, I don't care about that. I'm not checking. I don't even know if I'm using React or Angular. That's completely irrelevant. The thing is, I got a URL, HTTP, blah, 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 blah. So if I do a request from the front end, yeah, it fetches the right data. So that's correct. However, because this is just a URL, I should be able to paste that URL on my web browser. If I go to 3001, it's okay. Yeah? So if I go to 3000, it should return the same data. But it's...
Will the front, for example, if we have a URL like REST fruits apple in the front end also,
Yes.
then how?
Correct. If my front-end routing with React will be handling that URL, then of course I will understand that. Yeah. If you will have defined a route, you remember how to declare routes with that workshop last week, then okay. But of course, I don't have any routing. I don't even have React Router DOM installed. So if I go to my app.js, guys, there is nothing about routing here. So the front end should not handle that. I clearly specify the proxy. Guys, that's wrong. I mean, I'll tell you something. I tested that 20 minutes ago, and I tested that for years, and it's been always working fine. So there is something wrong, and to be honest, I cannot tell you why Chrome is not, and not even Safari. It's something a bit smelly. And
Sorry, one more thing. Are we okay to experiment? Is it not because there is a console log only, and it's not, it doesn't kind of tell us?
No. The console log is right. So once again, where I am. So
but
Yeah.
maybe we should, I don't know.
That view is perfect. I mean, the app, the front-end app works perfectly. Yeah, I just do a request and then it gives me the right data. That's perfect. I'm not complaining about that. What I'm complaining is that endpoint, localhost 3000 REST fruits Apple, returns something different depending on whether you invoke it from JavaScript or from the web browser. That doesn't make sense. That doesn't really make sense. But anyway, I don't want to waste more time dealing with that problem because we will run out of time.
Maybe it still finds the same details on the front end, so it does a request from the back end, like the same links or URL.
Guys, trust me, don't try to find a logical explanation, right? I've been creating thousands of endpoints in my life. I never seen that. That's bullshit, yeah? If something happens, what we want me to tell you, right?
One question.
Yep.
What if, because front-end and back-end developers, they don't work, I don't know if they like work together. but
Not necessarily.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if both on front-end and back-end, if they create the same URL, what will happen?
Okay, that's a good point. So what if if the front end creates a route like that, then the backend will be never hit because the front end server won't pass the control to the backend. So once again, the front end server only passes the control to the backend if it doesn't know what to do with it. If you declare that route on your front end server, then the front end server will resolve the request, so then the backend server will be never hit. Yeah? Ignoring the problem of going through the URL and manually pasting it and blah, 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 ignoring that problem, reality says that I can really get the data from the backend thanks to the proxy. Yeah? So that's okay, that's fine. The front end is passing the control to the backend. So the next question is, now that should be a piece of cake, is how do I display the details of my fruit, of my apple here? How do we do that?
Can we assign it to a variable or this fetch?
Okay, you tell me. So here I got my data. Yeah? This is the fruit, this is the apple. So then what? Data.name?
No, can I see what's the response on the?
Yeah, of course, that's the response. Oops. So, yep, so if what is apple? Let me find it. So that's the response. Yeah, it's just an object with apple, name, apple, price, whatever, origin leads. Yeah, that's your data. That's the data that the backend offers to the front end. So how do we display that, guys? I want to display that data, right? Instead of 1.2, I want to display 1.79 because that's the actual price. I also want to display the origin leads here.
Data.price, data.origin.
Like that? Guys, do you remember I told you the most important workshop on this bootcamp was about introducing a state?
Oh, this dot set state.
This dot set state, and then what?
The data dot name in parentheses. In parentheses.
What?
If you want to display the name, or
I want to display the name, the price, and the origin of the fruit.
then it's this dot state dot. No, it's just in an object.
An object, and then what?
Fruit.
Fruit,
Colon.
colon,
Open curly braces.
open curly brace again,
Name,
name,
colon, and data dot name.
So that will save the name. But wait a minute. If data has all the information of the fruit, can I just do that?
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So look, fruit is an object, right? Actually, to keep things simple, by default, it's an empty object. What's your default fruit? I don't know. Why did by default it's an apple? That doesn't make sense. So for now, let's assume fruit is just an empty object. So now, when we get the data from the backend, then save it into the state. So now, if I refresh the page, you see, now my fruit is displayed based on the information provided by the backend. So, how do we display, that's the price, by the way, how do we display the origin? Let me show you the network again. Anyone apart from Anita? We know how to display the name, we know how to display the price, so how do we display the origin?
We'll just change the line so you call it price solution.
Right, yeah.
Yeah. And that's it.
Yeah.
You see? So now, boom. Super cool, because the data comes from the backend. What happens if I change, can I change apple with orange? Can we do that? Yeah. So now, look, if I search apple, there are no results because we are not checking any apple. But if I change apple with orange, the front end asks the back end, hey, give me the details of the orange. Here you go. And if we check, what was the other one? Banana? Oh, no banana. Oh yeah, here's the banana. I had to refresh, yeah? So that's beautiful because if now I go to my backend, if you remember, we created a list of fruits. You remember that? That's the backend, yeah? That's the backend. So if I change the price of the banana, will it work? I just have to refresh the page. Boom. That's a very powerful way to connect two worlds, front end and back end.
The keyword, the data is a keyword? Or
No. So data, this is just the argument. This is just the information that the backend provides, but I can rename it to Anita. It's just the argument name. You remember, when you use find, filter, map, you can use whichever argument name you want, right?
Even response also.
Even, yeah, you can, whatever, yeah? You see, it works. You can put whatever you want here. You can put response if you want. I mean, if I were you, I will tell you what I will do. Personally, I will put here fruit. Let's keep it simple, right? What information I want to bring? The fruit. That's it. Call it fruit. Yeah? And now that should, yeah, it works, yeah? And one more thing. Do you know how can we simplify this structure? That's right, Florin. So in modern JavaScript, there is something we call object shorthand. Whenever your key and your value are the same, yeah, fruit equals fruit, you do that. Even easier, right? So if we try again, still works.
I was asking about this response, even that is, okay.
Yep, you can put whatever you want. And then it should work. If I refresh the page, here you go, it works. Questions?
Yeah, can I see the backend?
Yeah, of course. Well, the fruits or app?
This here.
Yep.
So it's in a object structure.
Yep.
Fruits. But then we're passing that into JSON. But we need to have it as an object because that's what we're dealing with. Why are we doing that in between?
Wait, we're doing what?
So this is getting passed through as an object.
That's right. Once a single fruit, yeah.
But then we're doing JSON on it.
Yes.
I'm confused.
Once again. Yes. The backend handles an object, a JavaScript object, pure object. The front end handles an object. So they speak the same language, just JavaScript object. However, according to the web standards, what you pass over the network from front end to back end and vice versa is not a JavaScript object. It's something different. It's like a weird encapsulated data. That's why we need to transform it back from object in the back end over the network that could transform into blob, into something weird. So now on the front end, we need to bring it back as an object.
So is that something weird called JSON?
Yes. That's what we call JSON, correct. So don't forget something, guys. Here, we are talking JavaScript to JavaScript, but imagine you are creating a native app for Android using Java, for instance, yeah? That's why, yes, you may be thinking, hey, wait a minute, if we got object and object, what's the point of transforming things? But in reality, in a real app, you may have object on the back end, but then a different language on the front end. Yeah, if you're creating a native app for Android or for iOS. That's why what you send in between is not JavaScript. It's like an abstract format that then it's up to the front end to transform it into something that the front end understands. You just have to get used to that, guys. I understand there are many things here. I understand this is complex, but this is very powerful. And once again, that will lead us number 24. Anything else? Tiny? Any questions? Okay, yeah, fair enough. Yes, guys, I mean, I'm not expecting you to understand that end to end. You are expected to rewatch workshops, particularly important ones, yeah? State, this one, backend, these workshops are very, very important. Yeah? You are likely to get a similar question as part of either a job interview face-to-face or an unattended test. So you should be able to deal with these basic cases. Yeah? Of course, there is a similar example that I'm not going to do now, but I will invite you to do it, is what happens if I just get the list of fruits. Slightly different, right? What will that be now? Correct, Anita. That will be an array of fruits. So obviously now the way we display it will change slightly. We will have to loop over the array of fruits, and for each individual fruit display name, price, origin. So the example is slightly different. That's actually task 24, because you get a list of movies, so you want to loop over that list of movies to display them individually. But that's a separate story. Yep.
Which you already explained, but in the starting of the class you said that we should not be doing the fetch inside render.
Yes.
The reason you said is efficiency.
Yes. So you should call the backend just once, unless you know what you are doing. If you are building a real-time app to display dollar, euro currency, you know, of course there are corner cases. But if I want to display the details of a fruit, I mean, if I want to Google and I do a search, I get the results only once, right? If I want to change my search, I change something and I press enter again. So that's the same thing. Component in mount will run only once. If I move that code here, actually that's a good question. If I move my code to the render, can anybody predict the behavior? How many times the render function will run? Two times. We have, guys, we have one fruit, only the banana. Okay, so wait a minute. Giyun said 3 times. Chuck said, oops, I'm talking, all right. Chuck said infinite. Who else? 2 points. Anita, once. So Florin supports Yiyun, right? Anita, okay, cool. Sorry, Yiyun. Who else? Octavian, Kaini, Camila.
I think it runs until it finds the second fruit.
So, what's the number?
Maybe 3, I don't know which one it was.
Octavian and Kaini. Once. Okay. And Octavian.
I don't know.
Does anyone want to change after reading the screen for maybe a couple of minutes?
I think it will run once.
So Camila, okay, Jiyun now is alone, unfortunately. Yeah. All right. So once again, that's another classic job interview question. They present you the algorithm, and they ask you, what do you think about that? Yeah. So back to the web browser. Do you see that sexy thingy on top? Do you see that? Right. I'm sorry, no one apart from Chuck got the job. But because you lost the job, can anyone apart from Chuck, can anyone tell me what the hell is going on? Why I'm ruining my data plan? That proves whether you have any basic understanding about React lifecycle or not. The way this works is we will render, yeah, it will run once out of the box, but then the first thing we render, we call the backend. Fine, we call the backend once, no problem at all. What happened when we call set state?
State, the fruit, value of fruit changes. I mean,
From a React lifecycle point of view, what is the side effect of running set state?
render gets called.
Correct. Every time we call set state, we re-render. No problem at all. So we come here by the second time. And the second time we re-render, we call the backend again. And because we call the backend again, we change the state again. So what happens when we change the state?
Render again.
Re-render again. You see? It's an infinite loop, as Chuck suggested. Yeah, so this is absolutely vital, guys. That's why you can never do that. Yeah, that's clearly wrong. Yeah, so Chuck gets 2 points on the board challenge. Let me recommend you something because you will need that. If you go to the video tutorials, I'm not sure where is that, to be honest. React workshops, maybe. Yes. Please watch this workshop that I did last year with Time to React. Yeah, here I talk about React anti-patterns, and this is arguably the most obvious one. Yeah, so yeah, I don't know what is that, but I'm sure I'm talking about this type of anti-pattern. Yeah, super important. Any questions? No? All right, so thank you for watching.